No, it's really good to be here. I'm a hick. I live outside of Loveland, about 6 miles off a gravel road, but that's pretty local to here. So it's really nice to not have to burn a plane ticket somewhere to share with you. How do you like the sunshine after that start we had to the day this morning? It was a bit nippy this morning. I really do love talking to churches, so it was an easy yes for Jack to get me to come. I'm a vineyard guy, as he mentioned, and so the priorities in our DNA regarding God's presence and just being really authentic. Just want to have a conversation with you this morning, kind of bring you up to speed. Maybe kind of like shareholders. You had a stake in the responses that we're involved with last year, and as well as the ones that are happening this year, as Jack mentioned. But maybe a unique thing, don't want to get ahead of myself, but Convoy has really made it a priority to stay with people who are going through disaster. So we'll be a couple more years in Hurricane Harvey, Irma, Maria in Puerto Rico. We have 90 points of distribution on the island of Puerto Rico, and they're all local churches, making a credible difference in that. But we were in Hurricane Sandy for over 4 years. Just to give you an idea of the philosophy and the strategy. But the numbers I'm about to share with you, we're really celebrating God's favor. He gets all the credit in this. It's like the little boy's lunch in the Bible. If you want to have a normal life, there's nothing wrong with eating your lunch, right? But man, if you want an extraordinary life, give your lunch to Jesus and just watch what he does with it. And so what I'm about to tell you is what Jesus is still doing through a little boy's lunch, if you will. We're in the third quarter, so we don't have fourth quarter numbers to share. But we just passed this year alone, in the first 3 quarters, resourcing local churches. That's our MO. 10,570,525 people receive care and prayer through local churches because of what you did last year. And that's where we are right now. Who knows where we're going to be finishing out the year. But again, this isn't taking credit. It's really my buddy Hal, who grew up in poverty. His dad was killed by a drunk driver. Started Convoy of Hope because he knew what it was to live with empty cupboards, a mom who was badly injured, a dad who was killed outright. They went on welfare. A family with a single wide trailer invited the mom and 4 kids to move in with them. There were 10 people. They had to take turns sleeping in the bed. Who got to be in the bed and take turns sleeping on the floor. And when an organization is run by a person with integrity, who has a heart, understands the poor, these things are part of God's story. So since 1994, next year will be the 25th year of Convoy of Hope's existence, and churches that were researched through Convoy of Hope have cared for over 100 million people in that time frame. As a charitable organization monitored by watchdog groups, the #1 watchdog group in America is Charity Navigator, and Convoy of Hope is, I'm happy to tell you, just received its 15th consecutive 4-star award. There's nothing higher than 4 stars. And so if you're wanting to know what that conversation means, of over 1 million charitable organizations operating in the U.S., Convoy of Hope's in the top 10. And some of those have to do with keeping rivers clean, and that's important. The environment's super important. Or animal care shelters. All those things are sprinkled in that top 10. So thank you for your confidence, sharing a day's wage. You're making an incredible difference. That's what's in front of us this week. Jack picked Tuesday. I love that there's a specific calendar date involved. Going to work that day is going to be just special. Whatever day you choose this next week. I was reminded of a little story of one of my wife's buddies up in Fort Collins was praying about, what day should I work in that week? And she felt she got a calendar date, but the problem was she was retired and she didn't have a job. So she was thinking, garage sale, kind of peer-to-peer challenge or something, to work that day for the poor. But the problem was it wasn't a weekend, it wasn't a Friday or Saturday. And so imagine her delight the night before the date she chose. She got a call from her old boss. And this way he phrased it. He said, "Hey, can you come in and work tomorrow for one day? I'll pay you time and a half. We are just and we need you." So really, guys, there's a scripture I want to share with you from Proverbs 14:31 that illustrates just how much God identifies with the poor and how much the poor matter to God. If you oppress the poor, you insult God, the God who created them. But kindness shown to the poor is an act of worship. And I know how much you've been taught and encouraged in the area of worship, so I don't have to drum up anything or hype anything up. But worship often is more than the songs we sing, right? It's taking on our priority list, the things that are important to God. And I want you to know that your one day wage is strategic. And that partnerships, make giving through Convoy of Hope a strategic strategy choice. Over 100 million people served. And Jack and Wendy could tell you, we've had a goal of being able to feed 200,000 kids a day by the year 2020. For the last 5 years, we've been really looking at everything we can to make that a reality, with several 100,000 kids on the waiting list and just needing the resources and the infrastructure. By 2020, to be serving 200,000 kids a day, and I'm going to tell you something. 2 weeks ago, we hit that number. We're now feeding 200,000 kids every day through local churches and schools, many of them public schools, where we're able to share about the love of Jesus in public school. In the Philippines, in Haiti, 11 countries. So way to go, is what I want to say this morning. But what's really exciting about that number is now the infrastructure is in place for us to move forward and set a new goal of 1 million kids a day. Because everything's in place to do that now. So thank you for dreaming with us, for your confidence in us, for the stretching of resources. Because through the local church, here's what's happening. I love the scholar N.T. Wright writes, through the church, God is announcing to the world that he's in fact the world's wise, loving, and just creator. That through Jesus, he has defeated the powers that corrupt and enslave it, and that by his Spirit, he's at work to heal and renew it. That's a great quote. If you have your phone, you might even just take a picture of the screen on that one. But the church is the world's greatest distribution system. Like Coca-Cola spends billions, with a B, so that every bottle of Coke consumed is bottled within 100 miles of the consumer. And the church can flat kick that to the curb, you guys, in terms of its locality. In its global network, it's so local, it makes the ideal point of distribution for the things that matter to those who've been affected by a disaster or where chronic poverty is in existence. In many ways, we can watch. We have a war room at Convoy where we can monitor pending disasters. We're in the governor's council meetings in 5 states in the southeast where hurricanes and tornadoes are perennial. And so we can predict, in many cases, based on the models of where things will make landfall, where to set up our point of distribution prior to that outcome. And then monitor, get moving, and be there before the wind stops blowing. Other disasters, not so much. The wildfires that we're responding to in California, twice now this year, Redding earlier this year. Those points of distribution became points of distribution also for the campfire. But still, monitoring is a big part of how we can address those issues. But were it not for the local church and the volunteers that we can muster, we wouldn't be able to respond as effectively as quickly. So FEMA, for example, we're watching, we sent over 120 tractor trailer loads just to Harvey. We'll be there 3 more years, by the way. We'll be in Puerto Rico 3 more years. But in Irma in Florida, they had watched what was happening in Harvey. What they didn't know is that our warehouse was being depleted by the demand in Harvey. And we've shifted strategies now to where we're putting sheetrock in homes that were passed and were approved as being safe dwellings. But they said, hey, how are you getting these resources distributed? We have plenty of resource. We just don't have partners that can distribute. And we said, well, it's the local church. And they said, great, can we partner with you? Well, you need to understand that we don't partner with anyone who doesn't understand that we're doing only local church to advance the gospel of Jesus through showing his kindness and love to people. They said, fine. Will you take point for the next 6 weeks in Irma for all of Florida? And will you distribute 100 tractor trailer loads? Can you do that? And based on that agreement, we ran point for Irma through FEMA. So how many of you know that's God? That's the little boy's lunch I'm talking about. But throughout the year we had, how do you predict a Hawaiian volcano? How do you predict a Guatemalan volcano? How do you have other situations? But because of the local church presence to those things, we're able to minister to a group of people in a country that has been closed, Indonesia. The tsunami that occurred there, we were able to do our responses through local churches in a creative access country. How cool is that? But the ongoing hunger crisis in Africa, not in the news. Myanmar, places around the world are now being opened because of the efficiency and the generosity of churches funding the shipment of those resources donated as gift in kind through over 400 corporate sponsors, including Home Depot, Bass Pro, Quaker Oats, Nestle, Culligan, Coca-Cola, even Budweiser. Did you know they can water? Just so you know, it's water. But those partnerships are real. And the effect of that and the efficiency of the local church is addressing the true need. What is not chronic poverty. The true human need is hopelessness. And you got to understand when you're being devastated by a disaster, to see someone show up from your neighborhood, resourced by a local church, after so much death and despair, to know that people are thinking of you, and beyond that, God is ministering his life through these people. Makes all the difference. The cycle of poverty that's being broken for a lot of these folks happens when we can gain credibility through a disaster response that we do. And then we can start to put in place, there's a graphic of our cycle out of poverty that includes, feeding the children, not throwing food off the back of a truck, but as an incentive in a local school where they can come and learn reading, writing, arithmetic, hygiene, the love of Jesus, who he is, leadership principles, and then engage the moms of some of those kids, teaching them how to develop a business model that's effective, do a market analysis in their community, and launch them with seed capital, about $1,000 a woman, starts them on a trajectory out of poverty. That could include helping engage others that are in near proximity to learn about agriculture, and training these ladies in best practices. For example, last year, over 2,788 women were launched in their own business. And they were able to buy clothing and food for their children as single moms. Some of the ladies, made in one day at their new business what it took them a month to make as a house girl. Isn't that incredible? 98% success rate in the launching of these businesses, by the way. God's favor is blessing these ladies. Many of them who are Muslim or have been affected with HIV, trying to do the best they can before their life ends so that they can give their children a better future. How do you know that God's interested in that? And in farming, last year, over 3,900 farmers were trained. The total number of women since 2011 who have launched businesses is 10,171. And in terms of our farming program, over the same time period, it's 16,669. In Haiti, over 4,000 farmers are now raising nearly 40% of the food that we give in our children's feeding initiatives. They're growing locally. Do you hear me? But this is the basis for an exit strategy out of Haiti, giving it all Haitian leadership. These numbers. It's incredible. How many know that's God's favor? 16,669 farmers have been trained since 2011. So thank you guys. That's kind of the stakeholders update. But I want to talk to you just in the time that remains, which isn't a lot, about living the good life. We're Coloradoans, and I think you'll find that that's a frequent conversation. A lot of people have opinions, maybe not a lot of agreement about what living the good life means. But I want you to know that God's word is prolific in terms of that conversation about what living the good life means. Living the good life is about what God wants to do through your life to meet the needs that exist in a hurting world. So it stands to reason that a key component in any conversation that's about biblical compassion, it would, at lowest common denominator, mean living a life that does good. Living a life that does good actually becomes the good life that people want to enjoy. There's all kinds of wonderful medical research that talks about, the pursuit of pleasure and dopamine and its effects on the brain, and how there's a diminishing return when you pursue pleasure, and how true happiness really has to do with serotonin and an interaction face-to-face with other human beings and being a source of encouragement. It's actually baked into the hard drive of our physicality and our brains and our souls. That you really want to have happiness. It wasn't like me in my freshman year of college when my goal was to ski 100 days in that winter. I didn't hit that. I came close, But at the end of it, there were some great ski days, but it wasn't what I thought would bring happiness. There's a question that comes about when you start trying to attempt accomplishing good and making a difference. And there's a great book, When Hurting Helps, and you want to be smart about how you do the helping and not enabling, but breaking the cycle of poverty in ways that don't create dependence can be achieved. The dilemma is we don't know where to focus or how to begin because the needs are so large or there's just so many. Where do I start? You can end up in a place of paralysis and then just go to your default things that give you pleasure. So here's a question that I want to shake us out of that rut. I'd like to ask you the question, what gets you angry? That may not be a spiritual sounding question, but what ticks you off? Now, I'm not talking about things that happen in traffic or the current political discussions that we cannot seem to get away from on the television. But what disturbs you or diseases you? And then, what are the steps where I could do something about that? In Mark 1, we read about an encounter that Jesus had with a man who had leprosy. In that day, a culture was pretty harsh towards those who had leprosy. They were outcasts. They were marginalized. They had no hope. And in that story, we see where Jesus is just going about his day, and a man asks him, hey, if you were willing, you could make me clean. And seeing how this man's life and joy and destiny had been affected by the fall through sin in the world, having been his creator, it says in the scriptures that Jesus was indignant, like stirred up, like ticked. Not at the man's question like I used to think when I was young, like why would that, You got to understand, God's anger is about making a change for the good. You can imagine how this man's life was pictured when God created it. And then seeing how that image had been marred. He wanted to let the man know that he was willing. So church, as an outpost of the kingdom of God, do we care like our King cares about people? I mean, beyond just mental acknowledgement that he cares, is there an invitation in Scripture for us to really experience an altruistic care about those who are living around us who are suffering? As a teenage kid, I told you a little bit about my goal as a skiing person. I had something happen where I was invited to go to the nation, an island nation of Sri Lanka. It looks like a little teardrop off the tip of India. And we went and served there for 3 weeks. Saw incredible poverty. My first time, you picture a congregation if it were this size, and maybe 3 people in the room had shoes. And beyond that, stories about persecution. Like it's illegal to talk about Jesus in that country. And small group leaders who had actually been murdered. And I'm 17. And I'm starting to fall in love with these friends. We would set up opportunities to serve their neighbors, and some of the equipment that got torn down would be torn down well into 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're sweating, you're bleeding, you're talking, and you're falling in love with these people who had way more joy than I did. And I had 2 pairs of ski boots, and I had 3 pairs of skis, for powder days, and I did, Anyway, who's happy here? My Sri Lankan friends were happier than me, and I couldn't shake the fact that I had all these resources available to me. They had nothing. And I ran across the scripture, you don't have to turn there, but 2 Corinthians 8, Paul's talking, hey, I'm going to collect this offering. I'm telling you, I'm coming to town to pick it up, and we're going to give it to the poor. who are suffering under a famine. And he says, I'm not doing this so that it can be you're being tapped and it's a burden to you so they can live in luxury. I'm just trying to find, and he uses this word, an equality, in terms of shared resource. And what if in this country where it's illegal to talk about Jesus, I'm getting ready to move and they're going to need resources and they're going to need, and you've got it all over here. Share a little of that and then there can be equality. And I got on that plane coming home from that and I was a little bit ticked at my life. I had friends there that were laying down their lives. And it was like a dis-ease, like a healthy one. Because I had felt more of God's presence sweating out there in the jungle, setting up staging in a soccer park to talk about Jesus with these guys. I felt God's presence like never before. And I was getting to go home to Oregon on an airplane and go skiing if I wanted. Nothing wrong with skiing. I didn't come to bash skiing this morning. By the way, I look forward to going this winter, just so you know. But what if God's resourced us in a way that we could strategically share those resources so that in times of disaster or chronic poverty, we could help be an advocate for the poor, and beyond that, a resource for them out of poverty and into a hope-filled future. It was a constructive new sort of urgency that was hatching in this 17-year-old. Because as people who firmly believe that God is in control, the only way I had to look at this inequity in resources and poverty was to say, this is not God's plan. This is not how we're going to move the ball up the field. This is not how we're going to move the needle. And I think it's time for the Resource Church to sort of say, wow, what a blessing that I live where I live. And I can do something. And I can live the good life by being strategic about doing good. Intelligent kindness. So, what kind of things make you angry? I mean, as people who care about the things that God cares about, there's so many atrocities that are perpetuated by the work of Satan in our culture. Children dying from waterborne disease and malnutrition. 16,000 a day. Whoa. That's unacceptable. I'm really looking, Thanksgiving is like my favorite. I love pecan pie. Can you almost like taste it? Or the apple? I love this time of year. There's nothing wrong with enjoying this time of year, man. Is it yams? Anybody into yams? Butter? Yeah. But here's the thing. 16,000 kids a day is not okay. Is it? Right. Did you know that when I started in ministry 30 years ago, do you know what that number was? It was 32,000 a day. It's been cut in half in just my career lifetime. Do you know that in the next 30, some say 25, we have the potential to see the number of avoidable deaths in children reduced to 0? And that the church is leading the charge in that right now? It's time to throw in and get across that goal line. Yes? It's unacceptable that we have the power to change that from 16 to 0 and do nothing. Young women and girls being trafficked, orphans growing up without a family to love them, the rising number of children growing up without a father, a daddy. We can fix this. There are 300,000 kids in the foster care system in the United States. Do you know how many churches there are? 300,000. if every church, do you see what I'm saying? Just throwing out here, what can we say is unacceptable? Be a little ticked off about it because Jesus is. And I'm with him. And I want to be on the winning team. Do you know that we're on the winning team? And I want to be a person at the end of the day who has mud on his uniform, right? I don't want to be standing over there like I didn't get in the game. The world can be unmoved by these things, but the world cannot survive a church that isn't. We shouldn't be so used to suffering that it is no longer spiritually insulting to us. The 18th century theologian Jonathan Edwards said this, that human nature can get really lazy unless it's moved by holy emotions like anger. That's what helps us get out of the mud and our stuckness, is to just have a good old Irish fit about that ain't right. And I've had enough of what ain't right. Danny Glover and Silverado. But anyway. We just take intelligent, redemptive action. Otherwise, we're just stuck in this paralysis and spend considerable time doing nothing. One of the heroes on world hunger is an ambassador to the UN. His name is Tony Hall. He's been nominated several times as a recipient of the Nobel Prize. And we're really blessed to have him as a consultant at Convoy of Hope. He comes and speaks in. By the way, he talks about us lots of places because of what Jesus is doing. I'm not here to champion Convoy of Hope as if it is getting there all on its own. But he's saying what you guys are doing is making a difference. It will change the world. And he said, when someone asked him, well, when the need is so big, he was speaking at an event recently, and he got that same question from the audience he always gets. When it's so big, what can one person really do? Ever felt that way? Somebody ought to do something, but what can one person really do? And his answer's always been the same, and simply put, it's this: do what's in front of you to do. Do what's in front of you to do. We see that principle lived out in two of Jesus' disciples in Acts chapter 3. Peter and John. It says, it was 3 o'clock, so they were going up to the temple to pray. I love that. Like, what do you do at 3 o'clock? Do you pick up the kids from school or meet them at the bus stop? Or do you go to the gym? Or it was just kind of that. It was like, this is what our day looked like. At 3 o'clock, we were heading, boom. And this panhandler, if you will, maybe he had a sign, a little cardboard thing. Hey, I need money. And you know from Jesus' story on the Good Samaritan what the religious leaders did when they saw a guy that had been beaten up. They went this way, and they went the other side, avoid eye contact. That's why this response really got me, is that they said, look at me. Look at me. I don't have silver and gold, but what I have, I'm going to share with you. And it says, they reached down and he gave him a hand up. It wasn't a handout. He gave him a hand up. That's what's so amazing about this women's empowerment thing. Somebody gave up $1,000 for a lady to own a business and launch it. You can do something with $1,000 you probably like to do, right? And that's what we're talking about here, is like this moment. By the way, if you're a lady, don't miss the women's thing. One of my buddies, Kim Marie Page, is the speaker at that. Incredible. You've got to hear her story. So here they are, and this guy's in front of them, and he says, but I want you to look at me. What if the world is just waiting for the church to say, for a good reason, look at us. We're going to help you. We're not going to be a source of trauma to kids anymore. We're going to make a difference so that your grandkids don't need assistance. going to help you launch a business. That's why Peter's reaction is so remarkable. Here's what it illustrates, at least one principle that applies to us, that if we'll take the time to engage people in need, extending them a hand up, God can often use us to bring a transformation, a miraculous transformation to a life. You know, not looking away is the first step. When you know you can go to work one day and make a different future for a kid, and you stay engaged, it will transform both of you. Just don't look away. Ask the king, hey, what would you like to do right now? From 1978, back when I first went to Sri Lanka, just flash forward to some 25 years to December 26, 2004, and a tsunami hit Sri Lanka. Every Christmas, we had this tradition of calling our buddies in Sri Lanka and say, hey, how's your year? Remembering the amazing things God did through our friendship. And boy, to know the very next day was when the tsunami hit. And we weren't able to talk to them for 2.5 months. Not knowing if they're alive or dead. I was pastoring here in Fort Collins, a little church with 20-somethings with McJobs, dreadlocks, and, you know, they raised $9,000. I didn't want to ask how they got the money, but it was on their heart, you know, to make a difference. And I'm finally getting in touch with Deshaun, my buddy. And he said, Bryan, do you remember those backpacking meals you used to bring to Sri Lanka and we would eat at 1 in the morning when all the restaurants are closed? I need 1 million of those. And I didn't know that that was doable. I said, well, we got $9,000. Well, he said, Bryan, you need to partner with Convoy of Hope. There's no food on our shelves anymore. We'll use the money later, but thank you, but you need to partner with somebody who can get us the resources. That's how I learned about it. There's a movie you can watch maybe over this holiday called The Impossible. It's like a true story. Anybody already seen it? Yeah. And you kind of live with this family as they go through the tsunami. It's amazing. But just picture in that movie if a church is accessible to people who are suffering through an event like that, the difference that could be made in the lives of those people. The delivery system didn't need to be discovered or developed. I just had to hear about it. I said, man, this is the best thing I've never heard of. I'm in. And that's how this thing started. That giving a day's wage through Convoy, they'll multiply it 7 to 10 times, as Jack referenced. And it's going to be released through local churches. That can change. That can change a community. But through children's feeding initiatives and being discipled in leadership principles and best practices, business, you can disciple a country. Bono said this. I'm a U2 guy, so bear with it. The one thing we can all agree, all faiths, all ideologies, is that God is with, I love that word, the vulnerable and the poor. God is in the slums, in the cardboard boxes where the poor play house. God is in the silence of a mother who has infected her child with a virus that will end both of their lives. God hears the cries under the rubble of war. God is in the debris of wasted opportunity and lives. And God is with us if we will be with them. So you might ask, what do I do? You know, how do I be with them? I would say always this: lead with kindness. Lead with kindness. Paul writes in Romans 2, don't you realize that God's kindness is meant to lead you to repentance? Kindness is the method that God uses us to draw us to him. If kindness is how God uses and chooses to lead us to his grace, then it's an effective agent for us to represent Jesus to the world. He's the kind, wise, loving creator that's announcing, I'm going to undo what's broken. The book of Proverbs teaches us its principle about kindness, 14:31. It reminds us that kindness shown to the poor is an act of worship. And in chapter 21, it teaches us that kindness has its own rewards. Life, righteousness, honor. These are all things that lead to a life that does good. And in today's climate, kindness will really stand out, won't it? I mean, my wife overheard a conversation at the store the other day, and this lady's like rushing in. Her husband just got out of surgery. They didn't have enough this in the cupboards. She's leaving him alone, feeling anxious about that. And she's sharing with the cashier, so my wife just bagged her groceries for her. And, you know, the cashier and my wife left, and she got in the car. And the lady asked the cashier, apparently, who bagged my groceries? I don't know, she's a customer. She said, oh, I thought she was a worker here. No, I said, I don't know her. So anyway, my wife goes to the store, 3 days later, and she ends up in the line with that cashier. That cashier says, oh, I've been waiting to talk to you. That was so kind. It's like, what? Honestly, it's like a velvet wrecking ball to the culture of fear and hostility right now. Just be kind. It's courageous, it's powerful, it's strategic. But it does generally involve a little bit of sacrifice. Hal, my buddy who founded Convoy Hope, said, kindness isn't expensive, but neither is it free. It will cost us something. It's the choice to live a generous lifestyle. And opportunities will pop up from around that demonstration of kindness all around you. Adopting a child, coaching a baseball team, caring for an aging parent, or mentoring a single parent. Any occasion where we can say yes to a need and assist in a wise way becomes an opportunity for God to do a miracle. A miracle. And it can begin when we lead with kindness. I'm going to wrap up with a video in a moment, but I want to hear this quote. Anger without action is apathy. You can get angry, but if it doesn't lead to action, it's just apathy. And pity without any action is purposeless. James said, you know, faith without action is dead. You might imply, you know, but faith with action becomes a life-giving force. Baraka is a young man who has, at the time of his training, was our youngest farmer. His mother was a graduate of our Women's Empowerment Program. It's just a story, a picture into who you're working for this week. I'm going to sit right here, but you guys watch this video and come back in a minute.
My name is Diana. I want to tell you about my friend Baraka. I call him my Baraka. Baraka is hardworking, loving, caring, and always put a smile on his face.
I was little when my dad passed away. I don't remember him. My mom worked breaking stones so that we could eat. She would do anything to make sure that we had food.
every day of their lives in the sun, when it rains. So it's a very hard job. Last year, we joined her to the ag program. She used to have a very big smile. She was like, I can do this because I know how to take care of anything concerning with farming.
It felt so good having my mother take care of me. She was a very cheerful lady, wonderful, hardworking, and everyone here in our small town loved her. But one day, Mom was in an accident. She was hit by a motorbike. After 2 days, she passed away. I felt like I had lost the most valuable thing in the world. I felt like I didn't deserve to live anymore. I was so depressed. And then I told my brothers and sisters, we have to do something with our lives so that people won't say that our mother didn't raise us well. So I started with 1 chicken, and the people from Convoy came and trained me, and the number kept growing.
The business that the mother started, it's flourishing.
Diana taught me how to plant vegetables, and soon I started selling some of it and bringing the others home to eat.
The Convoy of Hope agriculture program, it's now feeding the whole family through Baraka. After doing all of this, Baraka did not drop out of school. Baraka has taught me never to lose hope. He trusts God.
I pray, and I know that God leads me in the best way. God knows what's coming in the future, and He sees beyond our circumstances. He leads me in the right way. When my mother passed away, I had to do what she did for us. Meeting the people from Convoy of Hope saved my life.
We work with the people who need to have hope. Your help is very important to help other people like Baraka.
You are one day of kindness transforms my everyday.
God won't ask you to give what you don't have, but He will frequently ask you to share something that you'd like to keep. And that's your choice. What a story. Of anyone I know who's doing what's right in front of them, I think of Baraka. You know, his siblings. He just had to step up. Just knowing a bit of personal story, he cried 32 days straight. And he said on the 33rd day, the Lord spoke to him and said, I'm going to help you get up, and I'm going to help you care for your brothers and sisters and honor your mom. Who knows what that family that shared $1,000 that launched his mother's business, who knows what they would have liked to have done with that $1,000. But because they shared it, that country, that community knows Baraka's story. Who knows what he's going to do with his life now? God is writing a destiny still. But Proverbs 19 says that when we are kind to the poor, we're lending to God. And He Himself will repay our kindness. Isn't that cool? How much He identifies with the poor. I just tell you, one of the most memorable in my life was one of those repayment days when I found out just a few years ago that Deshaun Wikwamaratne, my buddy in Sri Lanka, was appointed to the board of directors for Convoy Vote. And see, I can tie a tie. And I used to shave. His church is now 9,000 people. That's repayment. And I just want you to know that your one day of kindness really can't change everything. God bless you guys.